But we begin on the issue of birthright citizenship this morning. President Trump yesterday said he wants to end the automatic right to citizenship for anyone born in the United States. We want to know this morning what you think about that idea. Give us a call. Republicans can call in at 202-748-8001. Democrats, 202-748-8000. Independents, 202-748-8002. You can also catch up with us on social media. On Twitter, it's at CSpanWJ. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/CSpan. And a very good Wednesday morning to you. You can start calling in now. As a reminder, here's what the president said at an event with Axios yesterday.
On immigration, some legal scholars believe you can get rid of birthright citizenship without changing the Constitution.
With an executive order.
Exactly.
Right.
Have you thought about that?
Yes.
Tell me more.
It was always told to me that you needed a constitutional amendment.
Right.
Guess
14th
what?
Amendment.
You don't.
You don't.
Number one, you don't need that. Number two,
I mean, that's in dispute.
You could definitely
that's very much in dispute.
Well, you can definitely do it with an act of Congress, but now they're saying I can do it just with an executive order. Now, how ridiculous. We're the only country in the world where a person comes in, has a baby, and the baby is essentially a citizen of the United States for 85 years with all of those benefits. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And it has to end.
Have you talked about that with counsel?
Yeah, I have.
So where in the process?
It's in the process. It'll happen. With an executive order. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly.
That was the president. Our question for you this morning is on that topic of birthright citizenship. Phone lines are different this morning. Whether you think the U.S. should end birthright citizenship, 202-748-8000 is that number. If you think the United States should not end birthright citizenship, 202-748-8001, and a special line for first-generation Americans, 202-748-8002. We now turn to Jeffrey Rosen, President and CEO of the National Constitution Center, for more on the president's plan yesterday. Jeffrey Rosen, good morning to you. Thanks for the time this morning. First, on the president's comments about the process for ending birthright citizenship. Can he do it via executive order?
Well, of course, there are arguments on both sides, but the consensus among Republicans and Democrats is that he cannot do it by executive order, and that Congress cannot do it by statute either. So the relevant text is the 14th Amendment, which says all persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof and of the state wherein they reside. And the question is, what does it mean to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof? Because that's the qualification for being a citizen if you're also born in the United States. The original understanding of the 14th Amendment was that people who are kids of foreign diplomats or Native Americans or those who swore allegiance to foreign powers, America's enemies, were not subject to the jurisdiction thereof, but everyone else was. Basically, if you came to the U.S. as a tourist, you'd be subject to the jurisdiction because you'd have to obey traffic laws. So that's why the Supreme Court, in a case called Wong Kim Ark in 1898, which listeners can check out, said that the child of a Chinese legal alien who was born in the United States was a citizen of the United States. And then it cited the exceptions I mentioned, Native Americans and kids of diplomats. Also, during the debates over the 14th Amendment in Congress, if you care about the original understanding, someone asked, does this mean that the son of a Chinese person born in the U.S. would be a citizen? And proponents of the amendment said, yes, absolutely. So for all those reasons, the case is pretty strong as a matter of text, original understanding, and Supreme Court case law that neither Congress nor the president by executive order can eliminate birthright citizenship. The argument on the other side is that if you're come to the country illegally and you have allegiance to another power, then you're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And the Supreme Court has never formally ruled on that because the Wong Kim Ark case involved the child of a legal alien, not an illegal alien. So it's conceivable that the Supreme Court could accept that argument. But as I say, the bulk of the commentary thinks that's not likely to be the case. And indeed, the Wall Street Journal editorial page yesterday laid out the arguments I just did against being able to do this by statute or executive order and said that the president couldn't do it. The final thing to say is that even if you think Congress can do it by statute, for the president to do it by executive order would be even more controversial because, after all, the president can only issue executive orders that are supported by delegated authority from Congress. We remember that from the controversy over the Dreamers. And here, Congress has passed lots of statutes assuming that the kids of illegal immigrants are subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., including by issuing them Social Security numbers. So there's a whole lot of laws that presume that the Juan Kimar case was right, and if you're born here, then you're a citizen. And for the president to countermand that by executive order would arguably be going up against Congress's intentions.
Can you go back to the genesis of birthright citizenship? USA Today with a list of the 30 countries that recognize automatic birthright citizenship, most of them in the Western Hemisphere. Can you talk about why that is?
Yes, it's because America is not Europe. In Europe, citizenship traditionally and historically was defined by blood, jus sanguinis, it's called. And the idea is if you're a subject of the monarch, then you are a citizen. But in the U.S., we have a different vision, jus solis, or land, location. If you come to the country and express your devotion to it by your physical presence, then you should be a citizen. And this all stemmed from the most infamous case in American history, the Dred Scott case. So in Dred Scott in 1857, again, this is a great case to go back and read, the Supreme Court said that Dred Scott, who was born an enslaved person but was taken into free territory by his master, couldn't be a citizen because, as Chief Justice Roger Taney infamously said, that African Americans have no rights which the white person is born to respect, and claimed, historically inaccurately, that even free African Americans at the time of the framing couldn't be citizens because we, the people of the United States, just refers to white people. Well, that was very historically unconvincing as well as infamous. President Lincoln rejected the reasoning. We fought a civil war which rejected the reasoning. And the 14th Amendment was designed to repudiate the reasoning of Dred Scott and say, if you are born in the United States, you are absolutely a citizen of the United States and of the state wherein you reside, obviating any possibility that African Americans or anyone else born in the United States could not be citizens. So that's the basic historical idea, and it's a very powerful idea that distinguishes us from, as well as those 30 or so other countries you mentioned, from the vast majority of European countries, which have a different version of citizenship based in blood.
And Jeffrey Rosen, in our last minute, over the past 150 years since the 14th Amendment was ratified, how often has the United States gone back and had this debate about eliminating birthright citizenship?
You know, I don't think that it has come up all that often. Juan Kimar was in 1898, and folks haven't really criticized it since then. There was another Supreme Court case from the 1980s that seems to presume birthright citizenship. So although it may have bubbled up as a political controversy every now and then, at no point has Congress or the president ever made a sustained effort to eliminate birthright citizenship.
Jeffrey Rosen is the president and CEO of the National Constitution Center. Always appreciate having you on the C-SPAN networks. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you so much.
Taking your calls this morning, our question is, should the United States end birthright citizenship? Phone lines again, if you think the United States should, 202-748-8000. If you think we shouldn't, 202-748-8001. And that special line for first-generation Americans, 202-748-8002. Blake's up first in Leland, Mississippi, on that line for those who think we should. Why is that, Blake?
America and the world, for that matter. I think this just shows exactly what the problem here in America is. You see, we've had an unresolved situation, and it's called slavery. And America never gave reparations to African Americans. To build the most powerful nation in a blink of an eye, it could not have been done without slavery. And that was not intended for the whole world. For someone from China to come over here, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of Chinese having babies in hotels, and we have to take care of their kids forever. There's no other president has addressed this issue. I'm an independent. I didn't vote for Mr. Trump, but I think that he has, from the tariffs to the immigration, There's nobody addressing these issues other than him. And it makes no sense. Anyone with common sense should be for this, regardless of Democrat, independent, or whatever, because it just makes no sense. And we can't take care of the whole world. Everybody has locks in their doors, don't they? Everybody has locks in their doors, don't they? That's because it makes no sense for a person to just come over here, have a baby, and we have to take care of their medical. We're already defending the whole world.
Got your point, Blake. Shelby's up next in Tallahassee, Florida. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. C-SPAN, and thank you so very much. Mr. Rosen, I really do love and I enjoyed the series that C-SPAN gave with Constitution Center regarding the the Supreme Court cases that he had on, and I think that's fabulous.
Landmark Cases is that series, Shelby, and it's available at cspan.org.
Yes,
Thanks for bringing it up.
Yes, I love that. And, of course, everything that you do to teach and give us clarity. The young man, gentleman that was just on, it's kind of a sad situation that someone would make those kinds of statements and actually have no basis upon fact that we're somehow taking care of people who come in for a lifetime. I mean, to make that type of statement is really somewhat ignorant. Let us be clear. We do have need for a modern, comprehensive immigration policy. The issue, however, with the 14th Amendment bears note that this is, as Mr. Rosen stated, has to do with the context of a country that did, in fact, create stability and clarity for citizens who were here as slaves. So this is a civil rights issue, and I marvel at the fact that we have a president, as Mr. Rosen even stated, that would even bring this forth. Now, here we are, 5 days out from an election for a midterm election that will, in fact, determine the direction and transformational context of our country's political policies, and to have a president and to bring this up, and this is where we are. We've been at the crossroads here with this president, and C-SPAN very specifically is the value point that allows the citizens to come forth and share the commonality, the common good, the common value. Now, yesterday, that man went there to Philadelphia. When they say they had 2,000 people there in the street to protest a man who is supposed to be the president, his own family, who seem to not have any influence on him. Well,
Shelby, we'll be talking more about that trip to Pittsburgh a little bit later in our program. We want to stay focused on the birthright citizenship question, though. Do have a special line in this segment for first-generation Americans, and Mark's on that line from Philadelphia. Mark, go ahead.
Oh, hey, John. I guess I kind of have a dog in this hunt here. You know, both my parents were from Italy, and they were naturalized citizens. You know, it took them a long time. The fact of the matter is, my father fought in the U.S. Army in World War II, and he was a legal resident. He was not, in fact, a citizen. My father didn't become a naturalized citizen until after he had served in World War II, where he was lucky to have survived. You know, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to go, even though I don't agree with the president on much anything. I think this idea that we can have all these Central American, and you look at that caravan, a lot of them are women that are in childbearing age, and they're going to come here and have how many anchor babies? You know, I mean, this is kind of getting ridiculous, really. I think it should only be the birthright citizenship if the parents either are one or the other is citizens, or they have to be legal residents in order for their American-born children to get birthright citizenship. To have undocumented aliens, to have people flying in here from China and Russia and having children and their kids automatically become citizens, that to me is just total insanity.
That's Mark in Pennsylvania. A few tweets from members of Congress yesterday, their reaction to the president's statements about ending birthright citizenship. Nancy Pelosi, House Minority Leader, saying the president's new claim that he can unilaterally end the Constitution's guarantee of citizenship, a power he does not have, shows his desperation to distract from the GOP's attacks on Medicare, Medicaid, and people with pre-existing conditions. Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina saying finally a president willing to take on this absurd policy of birthright citizenship. Just one of Lindsey Graham's many tweets yesterday. We'll go through more of those later. And then Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat, saying not a peep from the president about how his trade wars have erased this year's stock market gains. Instead, to change the subject yet again, a cynical and nonsensical threat to illegally erase constitutional birthright citizenship by presidential fiat. We're taking your calls this morning, your comments on this topic. Doug, Round Rock, Texas, on that line for those who say we should not. Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. My curiosity on this whole thing is about where do you stop? I, living in Texas, know several parents of people I know that are what you would say anchor babies. What about their children? And for that matter, how many people in the United States are not immigrants at one time or other in their background?
That's Doug in Texas. Kathy, also in Texas, Montgomery. Kathy, good morning.
Yes, good morning. I think that we should end the birthright. The illegals are absolutely abusing our country's laws. We don't mind the legal. I'm second generation Italian. My husband's first generation Italian. They had to take that long boat right here, and we love this country, and everyone should have that chance. Ronald Reagan did try to fix the illegal situation by forgiving, I don't know how many million, 4 million at the time. Now we have 20 million illegal citizens. A country has to protect its borders. That is the responsibility of a government, and Trump needs to fix this. It doesn't mean we don't want people here from other nations. We do. But remember, a lot of ISIS people and dangerous MS-13, and, everyone's saying these people are so skinny and so poor. They look pretty fed to me. They're not very thin. Now, they're coming into this country as an invasion, and we don't want it. And if I could go down there and help our government, I would. Thank you.
Bonnie in Street, Maryland this morning. Good morning.
Yes, this here, it's like Trump has a vendetta against the people of South America because most of his workers are from India, and he had no problem with his wife and her parents going to the front of the line to become citizens, and his parents and grandparents are all from Germany. So, and look how many American citizens are abusing the welfare system. It's not just the people from down there. This is nothing more than spewing hate, and hate doesn't get you anywhere. And you look, I've seen people that are from these other countries, and they work hard. I'm not saying they shouldn't be legal and all, but they will go out in a field and work 24 hours straight. But you won't get somebody that can get freebies and welfare and all go out and work 3 or 4 hours. It's just sad that this man is spewing so much hate because something happened that he hates people from South America.
That's Bonnie in Street, Maryland this morning. Our question is, should the U.S. end birthright citizenship? On whether the president can do it by executive order. Debate on that topic yesterday. Paul Ryan disagreeing with the president, the Speaker of the House, saying you cannot end birthright citizenship with an executive order. I'm a believer in following the plain text of the Constitution, and I think in this case the 14th Amendment is pretty clear, and that would involve a very, very lengthy constitutional process. But where we obviously totally agree with the president is getting at the root issue here, which is unchecked illegal immigration. At the White House yesterday, Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, defending the president's intention to use an executive order to end birthright citizenship, saying there are constitutional scholars who say the 14th Amendment has been misinterpreted, says that the Supreme Court has never gave a solid opinion on this. But Matt Visor of the Boston Globe pointing out that George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband, thinks otherwise, pointing to this column in the Washington Post today by George Conway and Neil Katyal. George Conway, of course, the husband of Kellyanne Conway, also a lawyer in Washington. Neil Katyal, a partner at another D.C. law firm and former acting U.S. Solicitor General in the Obama administration. They write about the president's proposal to end birthright citizenship. Such a move would be unconstitutional and would certainly be challenged, and the challengers would undoubtedly win. But at its core, birthright citizenship is what our 14th Amendment is all about, bridging the Declaration of Independence promise that all men are created equal with a constitutional commitment that all those born in the United States share that equality. If you want to read their column, it's in today's Washington Post. Darlene, thanks for waiting in Henderson, Nevada. That line for those who say we should not. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I just think that this is so ridiculous. The African Americans were brought here as slaves, and they were guaranteed the citizenship under the Constitution as a gift, basically, for what they endured during the time of slavery. And I don't believe that there were any other people that were first citizens in America. I think the black people were the first formerly enslaved people that were given citizenship. What about all the other people that came here? The people that came here on the ships, were they citizens somehow? What guaranteed their citizenship? So we have a lot of immigrants from everybody else's country where they know where their heritage is from. Blacks don't know where their heritage is from. And that's why the 14th Amendment is so important. But I just don't understand what's going on right now. It's a horrible thing because even if blacks were given freedom, they were not given the free rights to become citizens in America because they're still enslaved. Because if they don't get out of high school, then they're going right to prison.
Darlene, can I ask you, are you African American?
Yes, I am.
And talk about this issue of heritage in Heritage to me, because I don't know where my grandparents come from. I mean, there in Nevada here, when the person that shot up over there at the Mandalay Bay or whatever, he was Norwegian. His background was from Norway. And where's your background from? We have to know where everybody's background. America is based on people coming here, migrating from other countries to have a better life. The better life of being an American and expressing and protecting the rights as an American. And when you're living in America, you are an American. You're not a Democrat. You're not a Republican. You're American. My father did 26 years in the Air Force, and I believe that he represented this country. My mother was a nurse for 30 years. And so if we understand that America is about building up from the bottom, what is the issue right now? Because there should be a process established for people to come here and become citizens, and we should know what the process is. The problem is there is no process. That's Darlene in Nevada. Gloria, Cleveland, Ohio is next. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. I don't understand either. I agree with everything the previous caller said. And if Donald Trump wants to be president of his base, which is 33% of America, then that's all of the tax dollars he should be allowed to spend. He should not be able to spend my tax dollars on what he wants instead of what I need. I pay my tax dollars for what I might need. I don't pay my tax dollars for him to go to Mar-a-Lago every weekend, to go golfing every weekend, and then to go places where he's not invited. He spent I don't know how much money yesterday going to Pittsburgh. Now he's talking about bringing 5,200 troops down to the border to make a point. Look, nobody comes from America. Everybody came from somewhere. And nobody has the right to tell anybody that they cannot come here because that is the way America was set up. Now, if they don't like it, they're the ones who need to leave. And they need to start a new country. And they need to do it their way. But not America. We're not going to have this here in America.
That's Gloria in Cleveland, Ohio. This issue of birthright citizenship came up in last night's Indiana Senate debate. Here's a bit from that debate.
That's the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. And so how this should be handled is by the Congress. And I heard you say that Lindsey Graham is going to put legislation forward. We have to take a look at that legislation. As of right now, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution says exactly regarding this issue. And so I'd want to see that legislation, make sure it was constitutional, and review it first.
Mr. Braun, over to you.
So birthright citizenship, all of these issues have accumulated over a long period of time. And I think the key difference this evening is going to be, are you happy with the way results have happened in D.C.? Do you think the people that have been there have fixed these problems? I know Hoosiers rank border security up there with the cost of health care and real worries about whether Social Security and Medicare are going to be there. I think finally we've got a leader in the White House that is doing something about it. You cannot keep kicking these issues down the road. Politicians on both sides of the aisle, and the senator's been there for a long time. You know, he's made a career out of being in the game. He's got to hold responsibility for it. So he did cover that issue, right? There's going to be legislation on it, and I think we'll see how that pans out. But it's the accumulation of many years of neglect, of neglecting border security. Thank goodness we're finally attending to it.
Before we move on, Mr. Braun, very quickly, the question was about legislation about birthright citizenship. Would you support it or not?
I will wait and see what the discussion is on it, and if Lindsey Graham is introducing it, I think it will be something I'll take a look at. I'm not going to say whether I support it or not until I read the legislation.
That Indiana Senate debate and all our debates available at cspan.org. And speaking of debates, they continue tonight on C-SPAN live at 8 p.m. The New Jersey 3rd District debate. Congressman Tom MacArthur, the Republican, Andy Kim, the Democrat in that race. You can watch that on C-SPAN, cspan.org. Listen to it on the free C-SPAN radio app. And speaking of President Trump, another campaign rally today, this time in Florida. That happening at 7 p.m. You can watch that on C-SPAN 2 tonight, also on cspan.org and also on the free C-SPAN radio app. Back to your calls this morning on this issue of birthright citizenship. Maura, San Diego, California. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Halloween, everybody. I was also wondering if maybe this was, in addition to being Halloween, National Suspension of All Reason and Logic Day, because some of what I'm hearing just is almost makes my hair fall out. I don't have enough to lose. But anyway, one thing I wanted to say was, as far as this immigration, this birthright by being born here, does this also say in the Constitution that that's even if you commit a felony by getting over here in the first place? Because that's what they're doing. And so I think the one thing that seems to be left out of the conversation this morning is if we have a wall, we're not going to have this problem of anchor babies because they're not going to get over here illegally anyway. So I think the wall is the first thing. But as far as President Trump doesn't have the right to unilaterally by executive order say make that change in the immigration law. But I do think that Congress must have that authority. I mean, well, why would the founding fathers make it so difficult to change an immigration law, especially when it's as ridiculous as the one we have? I mean, you had to get 66% of the people from around the country in 38 states and all that. I mean, give me a break. It's illogical. So anyway, have a nice day, everyone. And I just can't believe what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Anthony, Detroit, Michigan, thinks we should not change the policy of birthright citizenship in this country. Go ahead.
No, I think we shouldn't, and I disagree with everything the caller just said. It don't matter if you build a wall. You could build 100 walls around it. If them people want to come over here, hello?
If them people want to come over here, what, Anthony?
If they want to come over here, they gonna come over here. They build tunnels underground. They get over here every day. So what he said, it don't make no sense. You just wasting our taxpayer dollars on a wall that them people gonna still be able to come up under tunnels and come here. So come on.
To Lewis in Florence, Alabama. That line for those who think we should not change it. Go ahead.
No, I don't think they should change it. But the first thing they ought to do if they try to change it is to open up the wall border and let the Mexicans in because they was here before any whites were. And besides that, if he's going to start, let him start with his own son. He is an anchor baby. The one he had, the youngest kid, is an anchor baby. Probably all of his kids is anchor baby. So how you going to care?
Why do you say that, Lewis?
His wife wasn't born in America, was she?
She
brought over here.
She's a U.S. citizen now?
but it's still an anchor baby. He still have an anchor baby. We ain't talking about U.S. citizen now. We're talking about anchor babies. If she came over here and one American born over here, and she come over here and have a baby, that baby is an anchor baby. His own son is an anchor baby. So how can he sit over there and talk about anchor babies like that? Then he talk about his own interest. Just the politics. He's doing this on his own interest, against his own interest.
That's Lewis in Alabama. Bob, in the border state of Texas, Tyler, Texas. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. There's a big elephant in the room on this question. I could be for anchor babies, but Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which preceded the 13th and 14th Amendments by 80 years, says that the national government, federal government, shall protect every state against invasion. If we were protecting every state against invasion, then we wouldn't have a big problem with anchor babies.
Luis is next. Leesburg, Virginia. Good morning.
Yes, I think one thing we're forgetting is that this nation, is founded on immigrants, and if you stop the immigrants, our population is going to shrink. The natural-born citizens are not having babies at the rate they used to. We will become a small nation. These people make our nation. We're strong because of the work, the Social Security they pay, which, by the way, helps to support us, those of us who are on Social Security. You need a wide base, and we're not getting it. The other point I want to make is that I think Trump is leading toward dictatorship. He wants it his way, and it's shameful the way he brings out the dark side of our country. The prejudice, there's so much prejudice in this country, and our treatment of immigrants is appalling. I give to the United Nations fund on that because I'm forced to give because I feel so ashamed of the way our president is behaving toward these people. They come here, they work hard, they pay their taxes. Stop it already.
Jim in New York. Good morning. You're next.
Yeah, hi there. Trump's doing a great job. This is great. Let me say that my grandparents came from Germany, France, Portugal. Every one of them assimilated. And they all spoke English. I didn't hear any accent when I was a kid. They don't get push 1 for French or push 2 for German. I live here in Central Islip. All those liberals that are calling in, all those bleeding heart liberals, why don't you move over here to Central Islip? That's probably right where the caravan is headed for, right here. I can tell you that they're building a house across the street. I bet you they're all working off the books. What's all this about paying taxes? Will you stop it already? How many people can this country take? How much, you got some of these houses here. It's like a shanty town. You got so many cars that they're all piled up on the lawn. It looks like a junkyard because you got people living in these houses, renting rooms up to 5 in a room, and they're paying $700 a month for the room. And that's why they decimated the siding and the roofing business here on Long Island because they'll work for peanuts. And the roofers won't do that because they want to live as a family in one house, and they can't afford to live in one house. This is what's going on. And I don't hear anybody yet, and you're an educated guy over there who reads the Wall Street Journal and the Times like I do. Didn't Eisenhower have Operation Wetback where he sent them back? I never hear anything about that. And our country had, for 60 years, troops on the border. You got all these bleeding heart liberals, especially some of the blacks. They all moved out of Central Islip. Where did they go? Why did they leave? This town, the marquees at the high school and the elementary schools are in Spanish. They're not assimilating over here. They could give a hoot about assimilating, it seems like. The radio stations, we've got 5 or 6 radio stations in New York City that are in Spanish now.
That's Jim on Long Island. A few more comments from members of Congress yesterday about this issue of birthright citizenship. Senator Cortez Masto out of Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto, saying the president continues to promote hate in America, undermine our country's values, and attack our Constitution. Birthright citizenship's a constitutional guarantee. President Trump should be uniting our country in the wake of the violence and tragedy in the past few days. Instead of working to unite this country, the president continues to attack immigrants for political gain. I, along with every American, will not stand for yet another one of these attempts to divide us. Another tweet from Congressman Jerry Conley with a picture of the Constitution that he says he's going to be sending the president to read the highlighted section. He highlighted the 14th Amendment for the president's convenience. He said, "We abide by the sacred document." And then there's Congressman Steve King, Republican from Iowa, saying it's great news. The president will end birthright citizenship for illegal aliens. I've been the lead author of this legislation. It's H.R. 140 since 2011. And I'm very happy that my legislation will soon be a national policy. Thank you, Mr. President. That's Steve King from Iowa. Speaking of Steve King, making his own headlines, this from this morning's New York Times. As Pittsburgh began burying the victims of Saturday's synagogue massacre, the head of the House Republican campaign arm all but jettisoned Republican Representative Steve King from the House Republican Conference, declaring, quote, "We must stand up against white supremacy and hate in all forms." The highly unusual rebuke by Representative Steve Stivers of Ohio, the chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, came a week before the midterm elections, but after years of incendiary and racially charged comments by Mr. King, capped in recent days by his endorsement of a white nationalist running for mayor in Toronto and a meeting with Austrian white nationalists, which he funded through a trip to visit concentration camps. The story quoting Mr. Stivers from his Twitter page saying, Congressman Steve King's recent comments, actions, and retweets are completely inappropriate. We must stand up against white supremacy and hate in all forms, and I strongly condemn this behavior. Steve King firing back with a statement of his own, affirming that Americans of all races and, quote, national origins, legal immigrants, and natural-born citizens, unquote, are created equal. He blamed attacks on him as orchestrated by, quote, nasty, desperate, and dishonest fake news, aided by complicit establishment never-Trumpers. That's Steve King from yesterday. Speaking of some other headlines besides the birthright citizenship issue, this also from the pages of the New York Times, but also several other papers. The Office of Special Counsel Robert Mueller has asked the FBI to investigate what appears to be an effort to smear him, stemming from suspicious emails offering women money in exchange for fabricating sexual misconduct claims against him. Quote, when we learned last week of allegations that women were offered money to make false claims about the special counsel, we immediately referred that matter to the FBI for investigation. That one of the rare statements out of the Office of the Special Counsel from Pete Carr, the spokesman there. One other story to point you towards this morning, this out of Washington, out of the Interior Department. The Interior Department's Office of the Inspector General has referred one of its probes into its conduct of Secretary Ryan Zinke to the Justice Department for further investigation. According to individuals familiar with that matter, the Inspector General is conducting at least 3 probes that involve Zinke. Those include his involvement in a Montana land deal and a decision not to grant 2 tribes approval to operate a casino in Connecticut. The story notes that prosecutors will explore whether a criminal investigation is warranted. While an agency's Inspector General regularly issues reports on its findings, it refers cases to the Justice Department only when it is determined that there could be criminal violations. Zinke's critics, according to the Washington Post, welcomed a potential Justice Department investigation and vowed to press for answers, quoting Congressman Raul Grijalva, the top Democrat on the House Natural Resource Committee, as saying, if Democrats are given the opportunity to hold a congressional majority next year, Secretary Zinke will be called to testify in February on why his conduct in office merited a referral to the Justice Department. If you want to read that story, it's in today's Washington Post. About 20 minutes left in this segment. We're asking, should the United States end birthright citizenship? Phone lines, if you believe the U.S. should end it, 202-748-8000. If you believe the United States should not end birthright citizenship, 202-748-8001. And a special line for first-generation Americans, 202-748-8002. Larry, thanks for waiting. Temple Hills, Maryland. Go ahead.
First of all, the president is making stuff up again. He's incredible. That is, without credibility. He says this is the only nation that has birthright and birthright citizenship. This is one of 30 nations that does that. We were talking about immigration, whether it be legal or illegal. Where does the word invasion come in? I don't see anybody with arms or guns or anything from the film footage I see on the news of this caravan that's coming up from the south, the southern border. The man admitted just last week, I believe, that he's a nationalist. That's code speak for white supremacists. America needs to wake up and see what this man is. What happened last Saturday in Pittsburgh reminded me of Crystal Map. The night when all the glass was broken in Germany by the brown shirts. This man is leading us down a freeway on the left side of the road. It's going to create a head-on collision.
That's Larry in Maryland. Ruben is in Florida on that line for those who think we should end it. Go ahead.
Well, it's kind of debated, but it don't make no sense for the United States to go all the way to North Korea over there, almost to get in a wall, and they can't even go next door and straighten this little bit of mess out, because a lot of those people are good people. And I know a lot of them bad people too, but that's what he said, the president. It just don't make no sense, man. It ain't nothing you can talk about. It's a political. He's just trying to get back in the White House. He's not going to get there no more. Thank you.
To Carol in Texas. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, C-SPAN, and thanks for taking my call. And I guess thanks for having this discussion. The 14th Amendment is crystal clear that, you know, all people born in the United States are citizens. This is exactly how Donald John Trump became a citizen of the United States, how I did, and how most of your callers became citizens. And we became citizens because we were born here. It didn't really matter where our parents came from. One of the things that's discouraging to hear is you hear, like the guy who called and complained about Spanish-speaking radio stations and things like that. I have news for people. Most of the southwest of the United States used to be part of Mexico years ago. It's not anymore. They had a treaty called Guadalupe-Hidalgo in 1848 that said anybody north of the borderline established by the treaty was an American citizen, and they made that crystal clear. But if you come down to Texas and you go south towards San Antonio and everything, you'll find people speaking Spanish, and they have brown skin, and I got news for you. Those are the Americans. Okay, so this idea that we're going to enforce things based on the color of people's skin again, this is completely wrong. It's racist. That's what's coming out of the president's mouth. I mean, they're locking little children up in cages down on the border. This is exactly what they're talking about when they talk about dog whistle politics right before the election to try and get a certain type of people to come out and support this guy. This is a complete mistake. This kind of stuff, this kind of rhetoric, this talk out of the president led to the shootings in Pittsburgh. He should be ashamed of himself, and anybody that gives credence to him should be ashamed, because the 14th Amendment is crystal clear. It required 2/3 of both houses of Congress to change the amendment, and then you'd have to ratify another amendment with 3/4 of the states of the United States to ratify the amendment. So thanks for taking my call.
That's Carol in Texas this morning saying the Constitution's clear on this issue. This is the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. The editorial board saying President Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship would violate the Constitution. They say if President Trump wants to end the practice that is sometimes called birth tourism, he can always draft and campaign for a constitutional amendment. But Congress is unlikely to agree and pass a law, much less an amendment. So he's making this futile gesture of the executive order just a week before the election day. Here's what Vice President Mike Pence had to say yesterday about this issue at an event with Politico.
What I think the president's made clear is that we are looking at action that would reconsider birthright citizenship. We all know what the 14th Amendment says. We all cherish the language of the 14th Amendment. But the Supreme Court of the United States has never ruled on whether or not the language of the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, applies specifically to people who are in the country illegally. And I think the president's looking at executive action. I know the Congress has looked at legislative action to reconsider that. But our broad objective here is we need to fix a broken immigration system that's being used by people who literally are exploiting vulnerable people, enticing them to make this long journey north to our border in the hopes of coming into our country illegally. And we need to have a system where people know how to come into the United States legally, and that we have a system that's working for the American people first, and that it's working in an orderly way, like it did for my grandfather when he came through Ellis Island when he was 23 years of age from Ireland. The system isn't working today, Jake, and we've got to reform it.
Be a pretty drastic action to do that unilaterally, the president doing that by himself.
Well, I'll leave it to the president to announce whatever actions we'll take. I know the president yesterday made the decision that we're deploying 5,200 troops to our southern border. There's already 2,000 National Guard there now. We're going to have the troops there to support Border Patrol agents as this caravan continues to make its way north, but also as the crisis of illegal immigration on our southern border continues. But in terms of changes in the law, in terms of executive action, I don't want to get ahead of the president. But you can look back at that famous speech in Phoenix that he gave about immigration reform, and he spoke about us taking on this issue and taking on other issues in a way that we can have a debate about having an immigration system in America that's working for the American people first, and that includes re-examining this whole issue of birthright citizenship.
About 15 minutes left in this segment of the Washington Journal, having this discussion on whether the United States should end birthright citizenship. A special line for first-generation Americans. It's 202-748-8002, and Susan called in on that line out of New York City. Good morning.
Good morning, John. Thank you for taking my call. I am just so fed up with what the president is playing on people's fears, injecting ISIS into this conversation. I am a first-generation American. My parents came from Germany in the 30s. I have so many family members that were killed in the Holocaust who are scattered all over the globe because of what happens in Germany. And because there were even quotas then, so many of my family never made it here. But our country is about accepting people whose lives are in danger. And you have to allow for these people who feel threatened to come into this country and enjoy freedom. It's just too important in this country. The president is just going to go off half-cocked doing his stuff about birthright. He's just playing on people's fears, and it's working for him. It's just outrageous.
That's Susan in New York City. Linda is in Bemidji, Minnesota. A line for those who say we should not get rid of it. Good morning.
Good morning, John. Thanks for taking my call. I have a couple of statements. One, I'm hoping he understands that not just Barron, but the other three of his children didn't, Don was born in 77, Ivanka 81, and Eric 84. But their mother did not become a citizen until 88. So I guess they'll be booted out. That's great. But my other comment is I live way up in the North Country in Minnesota. I'm about an hour away from the Canadian border. And right now we are harvesting sugar beets. It's a nasty job. Nobody likes to do it. However, right now there are a lot of Latinos up here doing this job because the white man that don't want these people to come in here won't take the job. So that's my point, and thanks for taking my call.
David, Baldwin Place, New York. You're next.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, John. I am in support of upholding the 14th Amendment. I was born and raised in Iran, came here, have a family of five. Five of us have 25 degrees, including advanced degrees. The debate regarding tourism birth is something that has to be done in a rational, logical, and government-driven process. However, the far more adverse ramification of such ideologically driven, politicized type of rhetoric is that the nearly 100 million, it's approaching fast 1/3 of the U.S. population who are either naturalized, legal residents, or their children in this country, their daily lives have been totally impacted. Safety, security, professional advancement and opportunities and equal opportunities of such nearly 100 million have been adversely impacted because of what our so-called president has driven a wedge among three major strata of 333 million U.S. population, and that must be stopped now.
That's David in New York. A few tweets from viewers as we've been having this conversation this morning. Mark writes in that this is a distraction from the failed tax cuts, an attempt to rile up the GOP base for their next Tuesday voting. Nothing more. Another tweet this morning from Charity who writes in, I don't think we should end it. I do think we need an amendment that can cut out the vacation baby citizen. We need a time limit of a few years of proof of contribution to economy through schooling or job held that the non-citizen has before we give the baby some citizenship. And one more from Fieldbrook Rocks. How would this work? The doctor delivering the baby would have to decide on the spot if the child can be a citizen. What if the father is not there and the mom claims that the father is a citizen? Taking your calls this morning, a few minutes left in this segment. Don is in Tennessee. That line for those who think we should end it. Go ahead.
Good morning. In the early paragraphs of the original body of the Constitution, there's a little phrase about except they be under another sovereign, and this isn't pertaining to birth here in the United States. And to me, I feel that means have they renounced their citizenship from another country to embrace American citizenship? And it just, when you see the DACA protests from a few years back, they're parading around their national flag from another country and stomping on the American flag and what have you. And I'm like, why give them birthrights? That's my opinion on it. I'm welcome for feedback. Thank you.
Rick's up next in Colorado. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I'd like to point out some facts so Trump supporters might want to hold their ears. I watched like 6 documentaries where Trump offers a program in his condos down in Florida that if rich Saudis or Russians or Chinese want to have double birth rights, they rent a condo for a couple of months while the mother's pregnant, have the baby, and then they have dual citizenship. He's just a hypocrite. And as far as this caravan, I think he created the problem by sending the gang members back. Why didn't we lock the gang members up here and not send them back there where they're going after their own people? That's what started this whole thing. Once again, the Khan family during the Democratic convention, he had it right. He's not read the Constitution, doesn't respect the Constitution, has never been held accountable. Thank you.
Some stats on birthright citizenship, particularly when it comes to undocumented immigrants. This from the pages of today's USA Today. Alan Gomez did the question and answer that appears on page 3. Citizenship was granted to about 275,000 babies born to undocumented immigrant parents in 2014, representing about 7% of all births in the U.S. that year, according to an analysis by the nonpartisan Pew Research Center. Those numbers represent a drop from the peak years of illegal immigration, which topped in 2006 when about 370,000 children were born to undocumented immigrants, or 9% of all births, according to that Pew estimate. Those numbers do not include pregnant mothers who obtain visas to travel to the U.S. shortly before giving birth. Russians routinely fly to South Florida, and there's an entire industry in China designed to coach pregnant women on how to deal with U.S. immigration authorities so they can enter the U.S. for the sole purpose of giving birth to American citizens. Mexicans also contribute a large share, 21% of births in Arizona in 2014 were to undocumented immigrants, and 25% of births in Texas that year were to undocumented immigrants, according to an analysis by the Center for Immigration Studies, a group that opposes birthright citizenship. Tom is in Florida on that line for first-generation Americans. Good morning.
Good morning, John. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to let you know that I am a first-generation American, and I believe in the laws of this country. And that's part of the problem today with a lot of people, including Americans. They don't take our laws serious. They're very easy to follow, and until they're manipulated by the legal system and lawyers, that's when things get messed up drastically. I suggest that the American population take some civic classes to learn about our country and our laws, and pick up a history book dated prior to copy date of 1970 and learn about American history as well as European history. And in that, maybe they'll open their eyes and see that history does repeat itself, and the lack of knowledge and the lack of knowing law and history creates the hardship and the chaos that we live in today. Thank you for the opportunity to have the time to speak with you. And I would like to say I'm very proud because my parents came from Czechoslovakia, and their name is etched in granite on Ellis Island because they came here the right way. Thank you, and God bless America. God bless Mr. Trump.
Polly is in Raleigh, North Carolina. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for C-SPAN. And the gentleman before me said some things clearly. So what I'm going to say, I think what the problem is that people are not speaking of legal immigration. When people file their papers and come into the country legally, they are speaking of immigration, that people come into this country on visitation visas, never go home, have a baby, the baby is here, and also people just walking across the border illegally. This is what Americans are concerned about. And I've seen it in the school system. I've seen it all over. I work in many areas in the hospitals, and I have seen the devastation that is happening in this country and is dividing this country. We are speaking of people who are here illegally or people who come on visitation visas and are pregnant deliberately to have a baby, or they never go home. Thank you so much. I think that will clarify what Americans are concerned about. Thank you.
To Bob, Jacksonville, Texas. Good morning.
Good morning, John. Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, let me say I'm not a fan of excuse me. I'm not a fan of Mr. Trump. I think he's the worst president we've ever had. But what I'm going to say has nothing to do with that. If this birthright had not been handled back in, I don't know when it was made law, but
ratified in 1868, I believe, Bob.
Okay, then after 1868, anybody that landed on these shores and was not they were not a citizen when they came, and if they started a family before they became citizens, then their whole generations that followed them were illegal. If I have a hard time explaining what I'm trying to say, but I think if you just think about it, if you're not a citizen when you get here and you start a family, then all of the things, if all of the people that followed you and your family are illegal. So if that would have been the case, so I think the 14th Amendment is right on. It's doing its job, and I appreciate you taking my call, and God bless you and C-SPAN. It's a wonderful program. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Bob. Bob, our last caller in this first segment.